everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. I have a special breakdown covering the Bitcoin chart. We are now breaking out once again, looking like we are about to be making the next move into new all-time highs. I want to talk about where I think we're going to be headed in the short term over the next couple months. We're also going to be jumping over here, taking a look at the total altcoin market cap, because this thing is looking ready to reverse. A lot of altcoins are breaking out with Bitcoin, and I do believe this is going to be the moment where we're about to see a much bigger move inside of the altcoins very soon. We're going to be taking a look at the Bitcoin dominance, analyzing when this is going to end up topping and when that's going to end up bringing all this new altcoin profit into the market, and then ultimately finishing up with ETH BTC, because I think that this is the most important chart when gauging the altcoin sentiment long term. At any point, if you guys find value in this video, do me a favor, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these updates. If you guys want to see how I'm investing my portfolio long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website to see all of my altcoin picks this cycle. Coming over here and looking into the shorter time frames of Bitcoin, all we've really been doing is consolidating at this same range. We had a false breakout onto the downside, only for support to hold, and we're currently sitting back around the mid-range. Now, as it stands, when I zoom out and look at this consolidation, because it's taking place right at these prior all-time highs, I've got nothing but confidence that this is going to break out. All this ends up being is a support and resistance flip of these prior all-time highs. Instead of acting as resistance, they're going to be acting as new support, and that's kind of what we're seeing right here. So even though we've had this pullback, I honestly think that this is going to end up resolving to a new all-time high breakout. And then once we get that big move, I'm thinking 90 to 100K. You know, we might see a correction, but big picture, I think we're going to be doing something along the lines of this. A much bigger move, upwards of 120 to 150,000. The way that the cycle is working, we're already front-running prior cycles. When we're looking at prior cycles from the halvings, we know that we're already at a new all-time high, whereas historically speaking, we've never really seen that, you know, this early into a cycle. Our Bitcoin halving in 2016 was about right here. We can see that this was kind of in the mid-cycle before we went into a new all-time high. The one in our last bull run was about right here. Once again, kind of sitting in the mid-cycle range before a new all-time high. This one is already sitting at a new all-time high, right? So, you know, this is a little bit more impulsive than anything we've seen. There's a lot more buyers than we've ever seen, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is the institutional cycle. We have more buy support than ever before. We have more on-ramps than ever before. One of the big things I look at is Coinbase, and understanding that Coinbase has already built their own layer 2. Coinbase's layer 2 is seeing more volume than any of the other chains, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Coinbase is kind of like the biggest centralized exchange in America. So they get the majority of the volume, the retail goes to them. And so now that Coinbase has their own layer 2 that they can automatically onboard retail to these new altcoins, I honestly think that this cycle is going to be so much more like what we saw in 2017, where things were a lot more impulsive. They were very parabolic, and we saw a little bit more of what you could say a bubble type cycle. Even though our last cycle was a bubble, each one of these are a bubble, the last cycle was not nearly as big. What we've seen in the prior cycles, the altcoin mania wasn't nearly as high. In fact, the only way that you really made a lot of life-changing gains in certain altcoins was finding niche narratives, DeFi, NFTs, you know, things like that. DeFi that ended up blowing up early in the last cycle during this DeFi summer. That was really where a lot of that profit was generated. Really, you had DeFi, NFTs, and memes. And in 2017, we had a lot of altcoins. Basically every altcoin, it didn't matter what you bought, pretty much did 100x. So there was a huge difference in the altcoin profit that was made here and the altcoin profit that was made in the last cycle. And I know because I got my first Bitcoin in 2016 right here at the very beginning of that trend. So I had the opportunity of seeing how that entire cycle played out. And what I can say, guys, is that the last cycle was very small. There was a lot of over leveraged funny money in the market, and that's really why we had to see such, you know, a big shakeout in the bear market with FTX collapsing, with Terra Luna, all these over leveraged players and lenders that went bankrupt. Last cycle was just kind of an over leveraged mess fueled by the pandemic and printing of money. So when we're in this cycle, we haven't really had this dynamic of factors being, you know, the economy's good, stock market's breaking all-time highs, and at the same exact time, we're seeing Bitcoin going into a new all-time high paired with an ETF approval that's seen billions and billions of dollars worth of trade volume. You know, we have everything we need to see for this cycle to be much more of what you would consider a super cycle. So when I do look at Bitcoin, I see the very real potential that we're in another one of these 2017 type of cycles, right? Where maybe we're kind of at this last little point before we start getting this next major move upwards, you know, maybe 200K. It's hard to say realistically, guys. The thing I'm mainly watching for is the 4-year cycles, because this is going to tell us whether we're inside of a left translation or whether we're inside of a right translation. So based off the 4-year cycles, the 4-year cycle low is going to be the very end of 2026. So you're looking about, you know, right here approximately. and that's going to be 1,450 days from our cycle low. So our cycle low happened at the end of 2022. So 4 years from that point is going to be taking us to basically November 2026, the very end of that year. That's going to be 1,450 days from our cycle low. So now where we're at, because we're already front running our prior cycles, we have to analyze the mid-range point. This will determine whether we're in a left translation or a right translation. Because we're already front running, we know that this cycle is going to be a little bit different than years past. And what we can look at here is the mid-cycle range as determining where that's going to be. So we can see here that this is the mid-cycle point. We have the cycle low, and then this will be the future cycle low, right? And that's the way you measure a cycle. So if we were to see a cycle top take place on the left side of this mid-range point over here, which this is showing September, October, November, basically the end of year of this year as being the cycle top. And if we were to see a shortened cycle, which is, kind of what we're already doing as far as front running could be the signal that we are about to see an early cycle top. And if we were to top on the left side of the mid-range point, that would ultimately show that this is a left translated cycle, because whatever side the price peaks on from the mid-range, this would be a right translated cycle, this would be a left translated cycle. So maybe this ends up doing something like this, right? Where maybe we make another run up to this 100K level, then we pull back, and then we get a more sustained move upwards of same price, 200K. But instead of peaking on the left side of this, we peak on the right, and then we end up peaking more towards like the end of the year, right? 2025, something a lot more, lengthy in consolidation, right? Something more along the lines of this. This would be your standard sort of right translated cycle, and that would be a normal 4-year cycle where the bear markets last 1 year and the bull markets last 3 years. And then we keep going through those patterns. Because up to this point, that's the same thing that we've seen every one of these bull markets, right? Where you have the cycle low, then you have the next cycle low over in here. And then if you draw from bottom to bottom, it's going to equal 4 years, 1,442, 1,450 is 4 years. So that's why we look at these 4-year cycles. Now remember, the mid-range point, whatever side the price peaks on of the mid-range, that's what is going to determine whether it's a left or right translation. So what we can see in our last cycle, notice how the price peaked on the right side. This is the right side of the mid-range. That's a right translated cycle. So we followed a normal bull run where we have 3 years up, 1,100 days approximately. I think 1,095 days is exactly 3 years. And then we have 1-year bear markets, right? So this has been the historical trend that we've been on every single one of these cycles, even going all the way back over into here. We can see the same thing. Cycle low to cycle low, 1,428, almost 4 years. And then if we draw the mid-range point, basically being 725, I think is the exact it would be. Notice how the price peaked way over here on the right side of this mid-range. That's a right translated cycle. So every single one of these cycles has been a right translation, and they keep following the same pattern. 3 years up, 1 year down. Now, what happens if this ends up being the difference maker, where we peak early, where we don't have the same sort of cycle that we're accustomed to seeing, where we end up peaking a little bit prematurely? And that's something we have to be very, open to, because of the fact from where we're at from the all-time high for us to already be making a new one, this is a much quicker period of time, right? Looking at 900 days that we've spent here, if we look at the last cycle from all-time high to the point of breaking it, it was 1,092. If we look at this, the first cycle over in here, you're looking at like 1,250. So we've already seen that this cycle is much more impulsive, much more parabolic, and it's already at a quicker pace than anything that we've seen. So where the price has to hit for us to go to a right translation, we have to peak at least on the right side of this mid-range. So notice how we're already pretty quickly, outpacing, and we have a very real potential where this thing starts breaking out and we do something like this and actually end up peaking early into a cycle. That's something that I want you guys to be aware of, because if that happens, it's going to be the first time that we've had any sort of a difference in our trend. And I do believe that all it's going to end up doing is we'll have an early cycle top, and then we'll have a lengthier bear market. Maybe instead of like a 1-year bear market, it ends up being 1.5 years to a 2-year long bear market. That's the only significance between a left and right translation, is going to be basically where we're peaking determines how much lengthier of a bear market we're going to have, because our target is still going to be the very end of 2026, because that's where our projected 4-year cycle low is going to take place. So no matter whether we peak on the left side or the right side, the bottom stays the same. The only thing that changes is the potential of where the cycle top is. So if we peak early, maybe the end of this year, maybe, early sometime maybe it's the end of this year where we see that cycle top. That at that point we would basically be looking at like, you know, 800, a 2-year-long bear market, more or less. And so that's what I want you guys to be aware of. If in fact we do see a little something different this cycle, I'm not writing off the potential that this is a more parabolic cycle in nature. Maybe we don't end up seeing an early cycle top. Maybe this thing breaks out, kind of go through a consolidation period, and then this thing ends up just going up to 250K. Maybe we go up to like 300K, something like that, before we do see that cycle top, and then we follow a normal 4-year trend. At this point, if we were to see this play out, this is just your normal 4-year cycle. This would be very similar to the prior cycles, and I still think that this is a very real potential. The only difference here is because we're already at a new all-time high this quick into a cycle, it's 100% different in comparison to all of the other trends. And so when there's a difference presented to us, we have to plan accordingly. We have to understand that, hey, if this thing really starts breaking out, maybe we're sitting at 120K Bitcoin at the end of this year. At that point, we're already going to be up so much in value compared to the prior cycles that I don't think it's a bad idea to lock up some of that profit, knowing that there is the potential we do see an early cycle top. However, you know, maybe this cycle just does end up being a little bit more parabolic in nature, fueled because of the ETF volume. And, you know, we're just front running, but we're still going to end up peaking on that right side and have a normal 4-year trend, a 4-year cycle, 3 years up, 1 year down type of thing. However, it's just going to be a little bit more parabolic to get to us actually getting to that point. I see either scenario, and I truly don't know which one is which, but the big thing I want you guys to be aware of is this is probably the one cycle where you might want to take a little bit of early profit just to be safe, knowing where we're at in this trend and just understanding that we are at a little bit of a quicker pace. You know, at the end of the day, if you guys have tiny amounts of money, risk it, you know, go all in as much as you possibly can. If you guys are already working with a lot of capital that you don't want to leave on the table, you know, just take a little bit of early profits. There's no real right or wrong way to play the game. All I'm trying to do is share with you guys what I'm doing, how I see the markets, and how I'm going to end up, you know, positioning myself accordingly. Now, coming over here and looking at the altcoin chart, altcoins are currently sitting and retesting their prior resistance. I should say this was their prior support, but it's currently consolidating underneath, and we are at resistance. What we need to see is the market get back above this level, reclaim it as new support, and from there I do think that we're going to be getting the next breakout above this level. Once we get above this lower high from our bear market, the same high that we just tagged recently being 1.26 trillion, at that point I think we're going to get a pretty big breakout all the way into a new all-time high. And when I see the altcoin total market cap setting up like this, it's very encouraging because I do think that there's a lot of profit setting in the market very soon. Now, at this point we've seen Bitcoin outperforming, but historically speaking, once Bitcoin hits that all-time high and enters new all-time highs, that's generally been where altcoins outperform, because all of the Bitcoin whales that accumulated back down in here start to rotate and take profits on their Bitcoin, and they rotate those into altcoins that haven't really moved. So I do think that that's where we're at in the cycle. Now, when we're looking at the altcoins, them being so much further below their all-time highs, I think that this next breakout is where we're going to finally set that in. Don't be surprised if Bitcoin outperforms throughout this period. But once we get above this $1.3 trillion level and we make this next big breakout into a new all-time high, that's the moment where I think we're going to see a lot more altcoin profit, where Bitcoin dominance is going to inevitably top. Now, that's kind of the big concern right now, is when is Bitcoin dominance going to top, right? Now, I've been updating you guys extensively with this analysis since we were all the way back down in here, just beginning the breakout. And when when we were consolidating over here, I said how most likely we were going to end up seeing this breakout of resistance. And that's exactly what we've seen up to this point. So far, we are breaking out of our descending resistance that we've been looking at. However, I still anticipate that this is going to end up breaking down. And, you know, it could break down right here, but I find it a little bit less likely. I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing go up for one more high, you know, extend up here to about 58%. And we might end up seeing this be a big fake out in a similar way that happened in our last cycle, where we were starting to top, we were starting to consolidate, and then we made this final sort of breakout, just barely broke above the range high over here, only for that to signal our next major alt run. I do think that we could be in for a very similar type of consolidation in this cycle, where this ends up being a false breakout, a bull trap, before we reject and fall once again below this resistance. And the big thing about this cycle, guys, I've been hammering home the same point. I do firmly believe that this next cycle will be the first time Bitcoin dominance is falling into a new all-time low since 2017. I do firmly believe the altcoins are setting up in a very significant new cycle. This will be, as far as a super cycle goes, the one if there is going to be one. I don't think that that means it's going to be lengthening by any means. I think that, once again, it's either going to follow a normal 4-year cycle or we'll get an early cycle top. Those are really the only two scenarios I'm focusing on. However, guys, if we are to see Bitcoin dominance falling to this new all-time low, it does line up a lot with the thesis that this cycle is going to be like a 2017 type of bull run. And if this is going to be a altcoin super cycle and we are to see something along the lines of this playing out in the Bitcoin dominance, it would make sense to me that we would follow a normal 4-year trend like this, where we get that cycle top at the end of 2025, sometime at the end of that year, and then we have that 1-year bear market capitulation like we've been accustomed to seeing every single one of these cycles. It would make sense that if we're going to see the biggest altcoin run, we would have the most amount of time for altcoins to run. I don't find it as likely that in the biggest altcoin cycle, we would just have this early cycle top, although it is still a very real potential, because if the early cycle top was to happen, then I just don't see the potential where altcoins run as hard, just because a normal 4-year trend has 3 years worth of a bull run, where if we see something like this play out, it would make a lot of sense that, altcoins are going to have more time to run, there's more upside potential, and it would make sense that that would be, the cycle where this thing, and it would make sense that that would be the cycle where this thing drops into a new all-time low with the dominance peaking maybe around 20%, maybe around 10%, something like that. I think that that's what's in store for this cycle, and that's why I've personally been betting a lot on this being the biggest cycle, the most profitable one, where we can make the most money. And I don't think it's coincidental that this is also the cycle where we finally have ETF institutional adoption on a massive scale. The only thing missing is the retail adoption, but I think that we finally have that this cycle, because the only way the institutions are going to be able to realize a gain is if they take profit. The only way they can have enough liquidity to take profit is to get a lot of retail money in the market. And I mean, it's a very easy to identify solution and equation that we're looking at right here. So I just think we're going to make a lot of money. Anyways, guys, this is the video I had for you. Wanted to break things down, explain what I think is playing out. If you guys found value in this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Please do me a favor by hitting that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these updates. If you guys do want to end up seeing how I'm investing my portfolio long-term over the course of these cycles, links are in the description. Go ahead and sign up on my website. I'd love to see you guys in there. As these altcoins are about to be breaking out, I think that there's a lot of profit potential. Looking at these cycles, it's got me very excited, because I think that everybody that watches this channel is going to be setting themselves up to make a lot of money. And, my ultimate goal is to be able to help you guys do that, because I've done it for myself. I've done it for my friends and family. I want to see the people that watch me and support me on YouTube do the same things, because this really is going to be a life-changing cycle, whether we have an early cycle top or not. I just think it's going to be life-changing regardless, and I want to be able to provide that value back to you guys in the same way that you've done for me. So thank you guys so much, and with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.